So I got a call from my dad one Saturday morning, and I knew something was a little bit off because his tone, his voice was just it just seemed different. Anyway, so he proceeded to tell me that he had been diagnosed with liver cancer, and at that moment, my heart dropped, but I proceeded to ask him, okay, Dad. So what stage is it like? Because I know we need this information. We got to start the fight as soon as possible. And so my dad just said, well, it's the biggest they ever seen. And so as I continued to press and proceed to get more information, he would just say it's the biggest they ever seen. So anyway, I packed my bags, moved in. My dad was in South Carolina at the time, and as soon as I got there, we set another appointment up to just so that I can get information on the doctor and just try to find out where we are in the process and what we need to do to start the fight. So we go to the doctor. The cool thing is when I saw this doctor just walking people out. I mean, this is COVID times. I was really excited for my dad to have this level of treatment from a doctor because everything counts at this point. So when we get to the back and we're waiting for the doctor to come, doctor comes in. First thing he says is biggest I ever seen. Now, I thought it was a little bit strange because he didn't open with, my name is, and then, get introductions from us. He just went straight to the biggest I ever seen. And so I said, okay, we're getting straight to business, just kind of my thought process at that point. So I asked, what stage is my dad at? And he said, oh, stage doesn't matter at this point. So, okay. So then my dad says, what about liver transplant? And he said, oh, you won't make it that far for liver transplant. And, now I'm starting to feel something boiling in my chest, And I said, well, what about chemotherapy? And he says, that's going to be about $1,000 a week. Now, at that point, I said, you're a racist. Just blurt it out. You're racist. And this guy got so offended, face turned red. He gets so upset, and he just burst and left out of the room. And his reaction made me almost think about why did I say it? Was I wrong? So anyway, as we were waiting for him to come back, one of the things I always try to explain to him that I do diversity and inclusion, and so I would explain, hey, Dad, this is what I do, and he just never really grasped the concept, right? Anyway, the doctor comes back in and, he says, hey, listen, I was really offended by you calling me a racist. Like I am not a racist. I am the farthest thing from a racist. And I said, well, let me explain to you why I felt that way. I said, one, I observed you with other people and I was excited for my dad to work with you. And when we first got back here, you just led with the biggest you ever seen. I said, and then, as we proceeded just to ask you simple questions to figure out where we are in this process, I just felt like you were not empathetic. You just kept pushing back. But what really put me over the edge is that when I mentioned about the chemotherapy, you went directly to like cost and how much is it going to be. And we never said anything about cost, and I felt like you put a bias on top of us and you don't know what we can afford or we can't afford. So that's why at that point I went to calling you a racist. So, he looks like he kind of understood it at that point. And so, he left out, he put my dad on a treatment plan. And as I was rolling my dad out, he looked up to me and he said, this is what you do. Son, this is what you do. And that was a big moment for me because, again, it's like I would always try to explain it. But at that moment, when I could see the pride in my father's eyes about like the work I do, it just made me feel, gosh, it just did something to me. But ultimately, so my dad started a treatment plan. I got a second opinion from a person who was recommended, doctor was recommended that was in New York City. I called that doctor. I told him about where my dad was, his diagnosis, and I asked him, like, what would you recommend? Because I want to get a second opinion, and then also, I just want to make sure my dad is on the right treatment. And so that doctor said that he wouldn't recommend bringing my dad there. He would put him on the same exact treatment. And he said, listen, every week just call me and I will send me the results of whatever you get from the doctor there. I'll analyze it just to make sure that everything is rolling smoothly. And so I was like, wow. And the next week, I called him. I said, hey, here's the results. He did a FaceTime with my dad, made my dad feel, just positive. And I said, listen, I thank you, because this is not the experience that we're getting from our doctor here in South Carolina. And I went to explain to him like the whole scenario of us first, getting to that other doctor, and just the whole interaction, and me calling him a racist. And this doctor in New York is actually is a white male. And he was shocked, and then he apologized, and then he said, do you mind if I reach out to the doctor in South Carolina? And I said, sure. I didn't think twice about it. So fast forward, my dad finishes the treatment, probably so maybe about a month later. And Monday we go in to do a follow-up, and the doctor that's the doctor in South Carolina met us at the door. Just, I was surprised because I was already bracing my dad, like, hey, he's gonna make you feel a certain way once we leave, and he was very complimentary. I mean, he just made us feel warm and fuzzy, right? And that's what I was expecting from the beginning. So we left out of there. My dad was feeling really good. That Friday, unfortunately, my father passes away. That Sunday, the doctor from South Carolina gives me a call. And I mean, it's like 9 a.m. Now, this guy's a very strict schedule, so for me to get the call from him that early, one, I was reluctant to answer because I didn't want to be stressed out. But I thought it was strange that he was calling me that early, because that's just out the norm. And so I picked the phone up, and immediately he was just giving condolences, and just, I mean, he made me feel really good. I mean, he was like, you're a great son. Your father was a great guy. And I just felt really good, after that conversation. And so it made me think back to the doctor in New York. Now, we never had a conversation about whether he contacted the doctor in South Carolina, where they had a conversation, none of that. But just the change in his interaction made me think, maybe they did have a conversation. And so then it made me think about just a couple things that happened in this scenario. One, the fact that I was able to just speak out and say, listen, you made us feel this way, right? Putting it on his radar. It was shock value, because I did say you're racist, and we had a moment there, but that level of awareness became instant. And then again, a doctor in New York, allyship, speaking out to his colleague and just talking about, assuming how inappropriate his interaction was, because again, we had a 360 change by the time we got to, the last visit that my dad would have had with the doctor in South Carolina. It was very, the whole scenario was very, it's hard for me. It's very sad. But again, what I realize is that in order for us to create change, just in general, just in whether it's in a workplace, whether it's personally, if people want to be more inclusive, to eliminate, just to push back on bias, we have to speak out, and we need allies. We have to come together in order to create this time of change that is very needed, like right now. Thank you for listening. Thank you for allowing me to tell my story.